Welcome to the Kourting Happiness Podcast. This is a space where self-care becomes part of your day. A space where you learn evidence-based strategies to help your life, share it with those you love, and cultivate well-being at work. I'm your host, Dr. Kortni Alston. I'm a former news director, television reporter turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I also understand hardships. While working my dream job in television, I lived a nightmare suddenly becoming a young widow after 86 days of marriage. I became committed to learning more about resilience, healing, and happiness. This is how I discovered my area of research, which is positive psychology. Now I'm living my calling of training individuals and organizations on happiness. And my new chapter begins with being happily engaged. The Kourting and Kourting Happiness is about a true courtship. I like to say commitment with happiness. The K in Kourting stands for the vulnerability of sharing my story, inspirational interviews with phenomenal people, the infusion of positive psychology, and so much more. You'll learn how to commit to your well-being one episode at a time. I hope you subscribe and share. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 89. I'm Dr. Kortni Alston. I'm so happy that you're here. Thank you so much for listening. So I always love to start with a quote of the day when I am in the classroom as a professor. I think it's a great way to kind of get to class and start thinking about the lesson. But one thing I'm just really drawn to quotes. If you had a chance to see levels of my home and even of my office on campus, you will see two things that speak to each other, and they are my two inspirational walls, one at home and one in the office, and they are filled with inspirational quotes. And so I want to start off this episode with an inspirational quote from Dr. Maya Angelou. And she would often say this, and I often share this. And it's something that I've heard Oprah mention many a times, and I hear it so often with people in my life. But I want to be able to just share this with you, and I want you to think about the quote in itself. So Dr. Angelou says this, quote, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." How you made them feel. Think about that quote. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Can you think of a time when you were talking with someone or they were talking with you and you walked away feeling just awful? Awful. How are those conversations now when you think back on them? Or was there a time when you were like, wow, I really enjoyed these conversations. That conversation really was, that was really empowering. I felt seen and supported and safe in that conversation. Have you had those conversations? But I want you to think about a time when an individual had a conversation with you that made you feel some levels of negative emotions. Maybe there were anger or sadness or even disappointment. I honestly see it all as a missed opportunity when we're having certain conversations, when we talk with individuals and miss out on certain dynamics. And the reason why I say missed opportunities is because even though we can be dealing with conflict in a conversation, there's still an opportunity to learn more. And depending on the dynamics, right? Providing support, helping them feel seen. And so to me, there's so much power in positive communication. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The power of positive communication and sharing some effective techniques to help you level up having a positive communication within your workplace. Now, this information I'm sharing with you is inspired and comes from an article that I highly recommend that you take an even closer look at. And I really treasure the work that comes out of this website. They publish quite a few phenomenal, well, actually, not just quite a few, countless evidence-based articles. And it's positivepsychology.com. And they published an article on how to foster positive communication. And I want us to focus in on the best practices for workplace communication. And it was written by Dr. Christina Wilson. And you can read more about this article, actually the article in its entirety. I highly encourage you to do it, because what I hope what it will do, it will encourage you to spend time on positivepsychology.com. Like I said, it's a great resource, phenomenal in terms of their information. I love how they break it all down. I love how they write their articles, especially allowing us to see the citations, but then also really it's a great way of sharing science with a mass audience. Is really, they do a wonderful job. If anyone from positivepsychology.com is listening to this podcast, I will tell you, I treasure you. All of you are doing a phenomenal job. And I just love being able to share it here with the Kourting Happiness podcast audience. You guys are phenomenal. So you can read the article on the episode page of this podcast. Of course, you guys know, but those of you who may be new to the podcast, welcome. And you can look for more articles on our podcast episode page. And it will allow you to kind of get a closer look as relates to the different topics. And each episode has its own page, and you can find them at drkortnialston.com/podcast/episode 89. So it's drkortnialston.com/podcast/episode 89. So Dr. Wilson does a wonderful job, as I mentioned in the article, but she also does a great job defining positive communication. And I want us to spend time discussing it. She cites Pitts and Sosha, who define positive communication is this, and I'm going to quote them, is not defined as the absence of negative verbal and nonverbal communication, but rather the presence of positive, enhancing, facilitative talk and gestures. Wow, that is powerful, right? First, I love the fact, and I think it's so important to mention this, it's not the absence of negative verbal or nonverbal. And I think for some people, they think that when you're talking about something positive, because I often get this when individuals may ask me about positive psychology or me being a happiness scholar. And one of the things, there's an assumption of when you mention positivity that you blanket the whole world with positivity, that is almost like there's no negativity that comes through. And that's not true. It's interesting because I value happiness, or when I'm experiencing positive emotions, because of when I'm experiencing negative emotions. So that's it's interesting. I value the sun even more when I'm listening and going through the rain or a thunderstorm, although I do like listening to the rain, but you know what I mean, right? So it's not this complete, operation in terms of zero negative emotions, right? And that's why I love that it is shared in this definition, that it is not defined as the absence of negative verbal and nonverbal communication. And I think when we're dealing with conflict, and particularly, all of this is important to share, that even when you're dealing with conflict, you can leverage positive communication. So, like I shared, there's a lot of great information in the article that you will find on the website. And Dr. Wilson does a wonderful job kind of walking us through. what we're going to focus in on this podcast episode will be the best strategies for workplace communication. So again, I highly recommend going to our website, drcourtneyalston.com/podcast/episode 89 to check out all the great information that Dr. Wilson is sharing in that piece. So let's talk about the best strategies for workplace well-being. So it starts off by talking about Pitts and Socia, and then really helping us understand the value of employee well-being. And so employee well-being is the best interest of the employer in terms of this scholarly article here. So employee well-being is in the best interest of the employer. And this is according to Pitts and Socia. And the article talks about, further, one of the main contributors to well-being of employees is their capacity for effective communication. And so what I love so much is that it's talking about how many organizations can require interpersonal and team communication for organizational really effectiveness. And I think this is important to share because, positive communication is really vital, really important in terms of building an organization, building trust, and really helping to motivate your team. The article itself, Dr. Wilson shares Goldman, and it talks about how things for us to think about. And I love this because I think this is one of the things, one of the topics, and that is often mentioned within my circle. And actually, I have a young woman that I met during my TED Talk, that has created an incredible book dealing with this topic, and it's called Emotional Intelligence Skills. Emotional intelligence, and what's so wonderful is that it really allows us to build some good strategies behind it. And what I love so much about what Dr. Wilson is sharing is it provides solid strategies for positive workplace communication by using the context of emotional intelligence, right? So employees will, that are following some of these skills really provide a unique approach and really value in the workplace. And so she has them broken down into, different approaches for you to think about. And we're going to discuss them on this podcast. One of them is emotional awareness. And she shares that this person knows what they're feeling, can explain why they're experiencing the emotion, and they're aware of their goals and values. I think that is so important, is to have that level of awareness. The interesting part, I will say, as a manager, when I was working in a newsroom and managing my news team, who are just, phenomenal. And I often share this during my training sessions with individuals, is that when I was aware of some of the things that I wasn't getting or doing when I was working individually as a reporter, meaning when I missed the whole dynamic of, oh wow, maybe I should be really careful when I'm out there covering this story that's dealing with inclement weather, or maybe I need to be a little bit more like I used a lot of common sense, don't get me wrong, but I can also recall not really having someone really point out, okay, wait a minute, you want to be extremely careful. This is how far away you need to be from, this level of harm or this tornado or hurricane, right? Without me going through too many specifics. But one of the things that I value through that experience, I value some of the things that I was shared that were just great best practices when I was working as a reporter, as a journalist. And then some of the things that I'm like, wow, okay. But I value the fact that I began to be so aware of myself, which made me more aware of my team. And it made me more protective of making sure that they were supported. And that emotional awareness is very important, because I think it's so really vital to really be able to look and to evaluate and to say, oh, I did this and I need to work on this, or, I've learned this and I need to just process it this, opposed to completely dismissing it. So I really treasure emotional awareness because it can allow you to really, just become richer in terms of your experience with other people. And even journalistically, the more aware I was in terms of my own emotion was so beneficial, because when I would interview people and they would trust me to share their story with me, right? I think that, having that emotional awareness is so key. So the next she mentions is self-control. And she says self-control employees are able to manage their inappropriate impulses, that they stay composed and they can think clearly under pressure, which is really invaluable when crucial incidents occur. And that is so important. So if you haven't had a chance, if you're new to the podcast and you haven't had a chance to listen to 2 episodes, we had this incredible guest on the podcast, and her name is Linda Crockett. And Linda is a workplace a bullying expert. She's out of Canada. She has an incredible nonprofit helping people with workplace bullying. And one of the things that I love so much is that when I hear about self-control and have a chance to even take a closer look as it relates to the definition itself, I value that it talks about inappropriate impulses and staying composed and thinking clearly through high pressure situations. For those, I think I could safely say, for those who don't have that level of self-control and may find themselves serving as bullies in the workplace, right? That certainly is not serving as relates to the culture of the workplace. But what I love so much is seeing the value of that. And if you want to learn more about workplace bullying and how to go about creating a more positive culture, certainly go back and take a listen to Linda Crockett's episodes. And not just one, we have 2 great episodes with her. She is really just phenomenal in regards to her work as relates to bullying. The next that Dr. Wilson talks about is trustworthiness. And gosh, that is so key. So she says that this team member is steady and above reproach. Trustworthiness is one of the most important factors for building bonds and effective teams. It's interesting because when I'm in the classroom as a professor, one of the things that I really value is building trust. I think it's one thing to go in and to be, and my dad always says, being didactic, right? But it's another thing to go in, sharing information and building trust. Another thing that I really try to make sure that I create a safe space for students to learn. It's no different when I was working in management, creating a safe space for people to really learn and to feel valued and to feel encouraged, right? To continue to grow. So that trustworthiness is so important, because once it's lost, that can be really challenging to try to, get back, right? So that trustworthiness is so key as it relates to really valuing and building a positive work culture. The other is understanding others. So this interpersonal skill, Dr. Wilson mentions, is essential, for positive communication, partly because individuals with this skill are really adept at reading nonverbal cues, sensitive to others, they're good listeners, and they can understand what others are feeling and need. It's really empathetic, right? Is really valuing understanding other people's behavior and really taking a closer look as relates to how they're behaving or their gestures or what they may be saying or maybe what they're not saying, right? Have you ever been in a situation where either this may be for yourself, you're maybe dealing with emotional exhaustion and you find yourself not saying anything, right? And no one might be, thinking about, well, why hasn't this person said anything? Right? So it's important to look at all of these dynamics in terms of understanding others. Another is communication. This person handles difficult conversations straightforwardly. They seek mutual understanding and foster open communication. This role is essential for great teams, right? So this person handles difficult conversations straightforwardly, right? And I love that because I also feel like it's also part of the trust dynamic. Now, it also, I will say this, that one of the things I did learn when I was in business school, and I was, and I've shared this so many times, and I think it's because it is so impactful. I've shared so many great golden nuggets of information during that time in my life, and I was working on my MBA. But I remember during that time of working on like a leadership training program that I was a part of. And one of the things that I learned throughout that program was the importance of making sure that you're serving as support for your team, right? But then also making sure that you are very empathetic and you're valuing having, being able to have certain levels of conversation, but also making sure that your team feels safe and supported. And so I really treasure hearing the impact, right, of really how effective and important communication is just in this generality. Another is conflict management. The employee who is adept in conflict management uses diplomacy in difficult times, encourages open discussion, seeks mutually satisfying agreements. And that is so important in regards to really understanding how to go about effectuating change or being able to make sure people are seen and supported. But it's important to understand an employee who's really adept in conflict management can, that level of understanding, open discussion, right? It's not, well, I said so and that's it. But hey, let's have a talk. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it, right? And let's try to seek a mutually satisfying agreement, right? Let's try to figure out what that looks like here. And so I love that in terms of the value and understanding the importance of it. Another is building bonds. The person is able to build bonds on a team, is skilled in creating a rapport and keeping people in the loop, right? And so, that helps build a bond of the team. So people feel like, wow, okay, okay, I knew that information. Oh, okay, that person's kept me in the know, right? So building bonds is so important. Collaboration and cooperation. So this employee can balance working on a task while focusing on relationships. They're friendly and cooperative and dispense needed information and resources, which is very important, right? And then also team capabilities. So this coworker exhibits team qualities such as respect and cooperation, and they're able to motivate and generate enthusiasm among team members. They help build team identity. So this is really important and key, right, in terms of understanding the value of building positive communication. All of these elements are so really just really worthwhile as it relates to building a positive workplace and really building best strategies, right, for workplace communication, which is so key. In the article, she also talks about the 9 techniques to foster positive communication. And within that dynamic, I've kind of shared some of them within talking about some of the elements as it relates to strategies for workplace communication. But it does focus on empathetic understanding and empathy. So listening, expressive and speaking, and discussion, negotiation, conversing, problem conflict, and resolution, self-change, helping others change, teaching or facilitation, generalization, and maintenance skills. So I would highly recommend going back to drkourtneyalston.com/podcast/episode 89 and checking out that article. I love that it kicks off the article in terms of talking about the 9 techniques for to foster positive communication with empathetic listening. That is so important. Empathetic leadership. So, listening, of course, is really important. But it just helps us to really focus, all your attention on another person and demonstrate appropriate nonverbal mannerisms, right? And one of the things I really value is one of the things I did learn in management training during my fellowship was the importance of undivided attention and making sure people feel supported. Right. So this article really speaks to the value of making sure someone feels supported, that they are supported, right? Through really understanding the importance of making sure that, that person is heard. And I just think this is really wonderful in regards to really understanding the value of creating a workplace that really treasures and values positive communication. I hope this helps you facilitate more positive communication in your workplace. And remember, if you need support, feel free. You can contact me. I'm always here to provide a customized approach to your team. One of the things I hope you remember and never forget is that your well-being is your most important job. And I'm here within this community here on Kourting Happiness to help you with that every step of the way. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Let's continue this conversation online. Email us at podcast@drkortneyalston.com. That's podcast@drkortneyalston.com. Join us on Instagram at Kourting Happiness. Don't forget, that's courting with a K. Also, I hope you join our private Facebook community. You can find us at Kourting Happiness Podcast Community. Our private Facebook group is a safe haven to share, meet more people looking to build positive relationships, focus on well-being, and create a happier life. Now, are you ready to spread happiness? We hope you subscribe and share this podcast with your family, friends, coworkers, and all the important people in your world. We release a new episode every Thursday. Congratulations on your continued commitment to your Kourting Happiness journey. Thank you so much for listening. We want you to be well, be happier, and be kinder to yourself. We can't wait to see you next week.